Welcome to Lesson 2, an overview of the evidence. Today we'll start by covering the limitations of current evidence and how to go about making progress and taking action anyway. We'll discuss a clear example of a multidisciplinary approach in a related field. We'll offer examples of evidence that is immediately useful and usable. And we'll provide a brief overview of the Better Disclosure Evidence Kit, something that you will gain access to within the learning material. Today we're focused on 3 learner outcomes. Number 1, we'd like you to acknowledge that better disclosure is more than an idea. There's actually quite substantial evidence to support why it's needed and how it can work effectively. Number 2, we'd like you to recognize that work is being done globally to enhance bodies of evidence and uplift the standard of contracting and legal disclosures. And number 3, we want you to remember 3 specific insights or recommendations that can immediately enhance your better disclosure work. The behavioural sciences are an incredible field. They've helped to advance our understanding of the way that people can and do behave in certain settings. However, replication, controlling for confounding variables, and other issues mean that the field is far from perfect. We have to take what we learn from the evidence with just a pinch of salt. What this means in practice is that the evidence provides a foundational perspective. It's a reference point. And it's crucial that we, as better disclosure designers, build upon existing bodies of evidence by conducting research that is specifically designed for the context of the outcomes we're designing to achieve. The agreement bypass bias is a relevant example of this. You were introduced to this proposed phenomenon in the previous lesson, but the thing is, we don't actually know if this is, in fact, a distinct behavioural phenomenon. Is this just some form of utilitarianism in practice? Is this decently explained by some cognitive bias that has been more formally studied? Putting it out there, we're not sure. Right now, we're speculating, observing, learning, and refining our understanding of this in different contexts. But as I mentioned a moment ago, we don't rely solely on our hypotheses and the consistent observation of this behaviour. We actively learn about each unique situation as best we can. This enhances the confidence with which we act. People all around the world, in psychology, design, neuroscience, behavioural economics, and other fields or disciplines, are progressively contributing to our understanding of the way we can and do, in reality, interact with contracts and other legal disclosures. This is a collective effort. The only way that we can accelerate learning that leads to meaningful action is by working together. A relevant and potentially meaningful example of this is RMIT's work on Sans Fogetica. Sans Fogetica is a font designed using the principles of cognitive psychology to help people better remember study notes. It was created by a multidisciplinary team of designers and behavioural scientists from RMIT University here in Australia. The thing is, Sans Fogetica is more difficult to read than most typefaces. That was a deliberate design decision. The desirable difficulty, as RMIT puts it, that you experience when reading information formatted in Sans Forgetica prompts your brain to engage in deeper processing. It's a brilliant initiative, and we'd love to see this available for broader and more meaningful use outside of just university study. Back to better disclosure. Let me highlight 3 pieces of information we find useful in a variety of contexts, from having discussions about the value of better disclosure as an approach, through to implementing specific design or interaction patterns. Firstly, a study that focused on the contracts of the top 50 credit cards in the US found some fairly unsurprising results. These contracts were pretty much unreadable. They were buried away. And they negatively contributed to the experience that people were having. Yet interestingly, consumers participating in this research described easier to understand terms and conditions as the number one thing that organizations could do to restore trust. The OECD's systematic review of the Behavioural Insights literature on online disclosures is another useful body of research. Specifically, they called out a series of recommendations to policymakers. And perhaps the most prominent was that important information shouldn't be hidden away in the terms and conditions. Important information should meaningfully and effectively be disclosed in the right time and in the right context. These disclosures need to be designed into the broader service experience, and fortunately, better disclosure caters to this deliberately. Lastly, the Behavioural Insights team did some wonderful work back in 2019. They looked specifically at how design variations impacted how people interact with and understand things like privacy notices and terms and conditions. And they found that upfront time to read indicators increased the likelihood that people engaged with a given policy by 105%. Whoa! They've just designed to encourage people to overcome the agreement bypass bias. And you can actually see this simple design variable implemented in both our data protection notice and our relationship agreement. We've brought this together into a more robust and usable document. We call it the Better Disclosure Evidence Kit. It's not designed to answer all the questions you have before you ask them. It serves as a guide to support the end-to-end better disclosure process and enable you to support the workflows that you're engaged in and the decisions that you're making with greater confidence. It covers different fields that are directly relevant and influential to better disclosure. It also breaks down the evidence, or in some cases, our rationale, if no direct evidence exists, for each of the 8 better disclosure consideration areas. You'll gain access to this, as I mentioned earlier, as part of the lesson materials. Like all that we are trying to do at Greater Than Learning, working together to better the outputs and experience we have with contracts and disclosures is vital. It's much harder going at it alone. It's more empowering to do it together. See you soon in the community forums.